Welcome to Nightmares, where horror meets your dreamscape. Here, we share spine-tingling stories that blend the thrill of horror with the calm of sleep, perfect for those who love a little fright before drifting off. If you enjoy these chilling tales, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll know exactly when a new nightmare has been uploaded. And before you fall asleep, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Let's see how far our scary tales have traveled. Sleep tight, if you dare. Now our story begins. I sat in my armchair, a relic of a simpler time, my eyes glued to the peephole in the front door. Outside, the once thriving suburb lay eerily still. The only sounds piercing the silence were the occasional distant screams and the falling of feet that grew closer every night. For a week, I'd been trapped in this fortress of solitude, my heart racing with every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 3 a.m. in a silent taunt. I'd been rationing food, but the grumbles in my stomach were growing more insistent. My pantry was a sad testament to my dwindling supplies. A few cans of soup, some stale crackers, and a half-eaten jar of peanut butter. The thought of stepping outside filled me with a cold dread, but I knew I couldn't hide much longer. My Glock 19, a cold weight in my hand, had become an extension of myself. With only 9 bullets left, each one represented a potential escape from the ravenous monsters that lurked outside. I'd used 3 to protect myself when they'd found me once before. 6 remained, and I wasn't eager to test their effectiveness again. The decision was made for me when the power went out for the 3rd time that week. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. In the pitch dark, the sounds grew louder, more ominous. It was now or never. I strapped on the holster and slid the last of the bullets into the chamber, feeling the metal click into place. My hand trembled as I turned the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a moonlit nightscape. I stepped out into the cold, my eyes darting in every direction, searching for any sign of movement. The air was thick with the scent of fear and decay, a noxious reminder of the world's transformation. The quiet was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that awaited beyond my front porch. As I descended the steps, the crunch of gravel echoed through the night. Each step was a silent prayer, a hope that I could remain unnoticed. The neighbor's house loomed ahead, a potential goldmine of supplies. I had to move fast. The streets were a minefield of shadows, every one of them a possible hiding place for the infected. I clutched the gun tightly, my knuckles white, as I approached the house. The door was ajar, and a faint light spilled onto the lawn. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and pushed it open. The sight that greeted me was one I'll never forget. The living room was in shambles, furniture overturned and blood spattered on the walls. My heart pounded in my ears as I moved through the wreckage, trying to be as silent as the monsters that had left it behind. In the kitchen, I found what I was looking for, a half-empty pantry, but it was better than what I had. I gathered what I could, shoving canned goods into a backpack. The clatter of glass underfoot sent a jolt of terror up my spine. I froze, listening for any sign that I'd been heard. The silence was shattered by a guttural growl from upstairs. It was close. Too close. The creature was moving towards the stairs. I knew I had seconds before it descended upon me. With a burst of adrenaline, I dashed for the back door. As I reached for the handle, a hand grabbed my arm, the grip stronger than any human's should be. I whipped around, the gun pointing at a set of eyes that gleamed with an unearthly hunger. The creature that had once been my neighbor stumbled towards me, drooling and snarling. My finger hovered over the trigger, the weight of the decision heavy on my soul. But survival trumped mercy in this new world, and I pulled it without hesitation. The gunshot rang through the house, echoing down the empty streets. Now, there were only 5 bullets left. 5 chances to stay alive. 5 reasons to run. I shoved the door open and sprinted into the night, my heart racing faster than my legs could carry me. The creature's cry grew fainter as I put more distance between us, but I knew others would come, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. I had to find somewhere safe, somewhere I could hide until the danger passed. But where could I go? The world had become a prison, and I was the only inmate still uninfected. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare slow down. The only thing that mattered was putting one foot in front of the other, getting away from the monsters that had claimed the night. My breath came in ragged gasps as I turned the corner, my eyes straining to make out any sign of refuge. A car, abandoned and smoldering, blocked the road ahead. Without thinking, I veered into the nearest alley, the darkness swallowing me whole. The narrow passage was a maze of dumpsters and shadowy figures that could have been anything from a pile of trash to an infected lurker. I held my breath, listening for the faintest sound of pursuit. The alley grew narrower, the walls closing in on me like the jaws of a beast waiting to devour me whole. Then, a glimmer of hope. A faint light flickered from the end of the alley, spilling out from a small convenience store. The neon sign above the door read, "Open," a beacon in the hellish nightscape. I stumbled towards it, the promise of salvation in my grasp. Inside, the store was a mess, shelves picked clean of food and supplies. The cashier lay slumped behind the counter, the once bright lights now flickering like a dying heartbeat. I moved through the aisles, my flashlight beam dancing over the wreckage. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. They were here. My hand clamped down on the gun, my heart hammering against my ribcage. I ducked behind the counter, the cold floor tiles a stark contrast to my feverish skin. The footsteps grew closer, the shuffling gait of the infected unmistakable. My hand tightened around the gun, the metal warm and slick with sweat. I took a deep breath and held it, counting the steps. 1, 2, 3. The creature appeared in the doorway, eyes glowing with hunger. It was a woman, or at least it had been. Her clothes were torn, her face a twisted mask of rage and pain. I didn't hesitate. 4 bullets left. The shot rang out, piercing the quiet like a scream. The woman dropped to the floor, but the sound had attracted more of them. They were coming from all sides now, a horde drawn to the siren call of fear and desperation. I had to get to the back room, find something, anything to help me survive. The gunshots had bought me a few precious moments, but I knew they wouldn't hold off the swarm for long. The door to the storage room was locked, but panic fueled my strength. I slammed my shoulder into it, once, twice, and on the third try, it gave way. I slipped inside, dragging the shelves in front of the entrance. It wouldn't hold them for long, but every second counted. The room was a cluttered mess, but amidst the boxes and debris, I found a can of gasoline and a box of matches. A plan, desperate and dangerous, began to form in my mind. If I couldn't escape, I'd take as many of these monsters with me as I could. The pounding on the makeshift barricade grew louder, more insistent. I knew my time was running out. With trembling hands, I doused the floor and the shelves, the acrid smell of gasoline burning my nostrils. 3 bullets. The first match scraped against the box, igniting with a fierce spark. I threw it, watching as the flames grew, licking at the shelves. The room filled with the sound of snarls and roars as the creatures outside realized their prey had turned into a predator. 2 bullets. The fire spread rapidly, the heat searing my face as the first of them broke through. I leveled the gun, my eyes locked on the burning doorway. 1 bullet. The room was engulfed in flames now, the heat a living entity consuming everything in its path. The creatures stumbled into the inferno, blinded by the fire. 1 bullet. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. I had to make this count. The nearest one lunged at me, its eyes aflame with rage and hunger. I fired, the shot echoing through the chaos. 0 bullets. The creature fell, lifeless, and with it, my hope of escape. The flames grew higher, the heat unbearable. I had to move, fast. I stumbled through the burning store, the smoke thick and choking. The fire had spread, trapping me in a fiery prison of my own making. Through the flames, I saw the back door, the one I'd ignored in my haste to find refuge. It was my only way out. I pushed aside the burning shelves, the heat intense, my eyes streaming with tears. The wooden door was hot to the touch, but fear gave me the strength to push harder. It swung open with a screech, revealing a night sky that seemed even more ominous than before. The alley was clear, the infected distracted by the blaze. I took a step outside, the cool air a stark contrast to the inferno behind me. My lungs gasped for breath, desperate for air that didn't taste of ash and fear. The sirens grew louder, a symphony of horror that filled the night. I knew what they meant. More of the infected were on their way, drawn by the light and the sound like moths to a flame. I had to get as far from the fire as I could, fast. I sprinted down the alley, the flaming store casting a flickering glow on the pavement. My eyes searched for an escape route, a place to hide. The world outside my house had become a labyrinth of danger, each turn a gamble with death. As the sirens grew closer, the shadows grew denser, and I heard the shuffling of feet again. My heart hammered in my chest, the beat a frantic rhythm that matched the pulse of the flaming world around me. The alley opened up onto a main road, deserted except for a single car, its engine still purring. The keys dangled from the ignition, a gift from the gods of survival. Without a second thought, I jumped in and turned the key. The engine roared to life, the headlights piercing the gloom. The car was a battered old station wagon, but it was my ticket to freedom. I peeled out onto the road, the tires screeching. The flaming convenience store was a beacon of destruction behind me, a stark reminder of the life I'd left behind. I had no map, no destination, just the instinct to get as far away from the chaos as possible. The car's radio crackled with static, the occasional burst of a frantic news report telling of the spreading infection and the futile attempts to contain it. As I drove, the world outside the car windows grew more desolate. Houses were boarded up, their inhabitants either safe or lost. Cars were abandoned, their engines cold and silent. The only movement was the occasional shuffling of the infected, drawn to the distant wail of the sirens like mindless drones. The road stretched on, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the darkness. I had no idea where it would take me, but anywhere was better than here. My eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of life, a beacon of hope amidst the despair. In the rearview mirror, the fire grew smaller, a dwindling ember of the life I knew. The sirens grew fainter, swallowed by the night. But the silence was filled with a new terror, the knowledge that I was now truly alone in a world gone mad. The car's gas gauge hovered just above empty, a silent reminder of the precariousness of my situation. I had to find fuel, food, shelter, and answers. The world was now a game of survival, and I was playing with the deck stacked against me. But I had the will to live, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The first few hours on the road were a blur of dark trees and abandoned vehicles. The occasional streetlight flickered, casting eerie pockets of light in the inky blackness. I drove through a ghost town, the buildings looming like silent sentinels, their windows eyes that had seen too much horror. As dawn began to break, I saw the first signs of life, or what was left of it. Two figures stumbled into the road, their movements jerky and erratic. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. They were far enough away that I could still make out their faces, the faces of neighbors I used to wave to from my porch. My heart ached for them, for the lives they'd lost, for the people they'd never be again. But I knew I couldn't help them now. All I could do was keep moving, keep searching for a place that was still untouched by the madness. The sun rose, a weak, pale imitation of the warmth it had once brought. It cast a pallid light over the desolate landscape, revealing the full extent of the destruction. Cars were overturned, buildings smoldered, and the once tidy lawns were trampled and stained with blood. My stomach growled, a persistent reminder of my dwindling supplies. The last of my food had been consumed hours ago, and the thought of what might be waiting for me in the car was too much to bear. I pulled over at a gas station, the pump standing tall and silent, the lights flickering in a sad imitation of life. Inside, the glass was shattered, the shelves bare. The cash register lay open, a gaping maw that had swallowed the last of humanity's comforts. But there in the corner was a small stash of food that had been overlooked. A few cans of beans, a box of crackers, a bottle of water, and some loose 9mm bullets in a drawer. It wasn't much, but it was something. I took the supplies and retreated to the car, locking the doors, and reloaded the gun one more time. 4 bullets, 4 chances to keep the monsters at bay. I took a deep breath and continued down the road, my eyes peeled for any sign of life that didn't want to end mine. The radio static grew clearer, and I caught snatches of conversation. People were banding together, forming groups, finding safety in numbers. They spoke of safe zones, of military intervention. It was a glimmer of hope in a sea of despair. But the road grew more treacherous with each passing mile. The infected grew bolder, their numbers swelling as the sun climbed higher in the sky. I knew I couldn't drive forever, that eventually I'd have to find a place to rest, to hide. The car sputtered, the needle on the gas gauge kissing the red. My heart skipped a beat. I was so close to finding somewhere safe. But the world had other plans. The engine gave a final gasp before dying, leaving me stranded on the side of the road. The quiet was absolute, save for the distant groans of the creatures that now had my scent. I looked around, my eyes desperately searching for a place to run to, a place to hide. There was nothing but the endless stretch of road and the encroaching forest. And then I saw it, a glimmer through the trees. A house, its lights off, but its door untouched. With the food and the gun, I had a chance. I grabbed the backpack and my flashlight, and I stepped out of the car into the cold embrace of the new world. The forest loomed before me, a silent challenge. The underbrush tugged at my legs, the branches snagging my clothes as I stumbled through the trees. The sounds of the infected grew louder, their footsteps thudding like a drumline of doom. I broke through the trees and there it was, a 2-story house with a picket fence, the epitome of suburban life. It looked untouched by the chaos around it, a beacon of hope in a world gone mad. My hand reached for the door handle, the metal cool and solid beneath my trembling grip. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The house was a tomb, the silence so profound it seemed to pulse with malevolence. The air was stale, filled with the scent of dust and the faint odor of decay. The living room was untouched, the furniture arranged in a comforting pattern that seemed almost mocking in its normalcy. I moved quickly, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. Each room was a potential hiding place, each corner a possible trap. The kitchen was a treasure trove of food, but the sight made my stomach churn. How long had it been since anyone had eaten here? The fridge was unplugged, the freezer a melted graveyard of spoiled meat and ice. I found a can opener and set to work on the beans, the sound of the metal lid peeling back echoing through the house like a gunshot. The food was cold, but I didn't dare risk a fire to warm it. I ate quickly, the taste of metal and fear coating my mouth. With the last bite, I realized the quiet had changed. It was no longer the deafening silence of an abandoned home. It was the watchful stillness of the hunted. My ears strained to pick up any sound, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the whispers of the wind. Then a faint creak, a footstep on the staircase. I clutched my gun, my eyes darting around the room. The house had become a prison, and I was the inmate waiting for the executioner's call. The door to the basement stood open, the darkness beyond it a yawning mouth. I had to go down there. It was the only place left to hide. With a deep breath, I descended the stairs, each step a silent prayer for safety. The basement was a cluttered mess, boxes piled high and a thick layer of dust coating everything. The air was damp and musty, the kind of air that clung to your lungs like a living thing. I found a spot behind the furnace, a tiny pocket of shadow that might just be enough to hide me. The footsteps grew louder, the house groaning as the creature moved through it. I could almost feel its hunger, a palpable presence that made my skin crawl. And then it stopped. I held my breath, the only sound the hammering of my heart in my ears. Suddenly the lights flickered to life, the bulbs casting a sickly yellow glow. The creature was standing at the top of the stairs, its eyes locked on the open basement door. I was trapped. My hand tightened around the gun, the metal cold and slick with sweat. 3 bullets, 3 chances to stay alive. I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerve, and stepped out into the open. The creature saw me, its eyes lighting up with a feral glee. It stumbled down the stairs, the sound of its approach like a death knell. I raised the gun, my hand steady despite the trembling in my chest. The creature was almost upon me when I fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. It staggered back, a hole in its forehead. The body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. 2 bullets left. The silence was shattered by the pounding of more footsteps, a cacophony of rage and hunger. They were coming from outside, drawn by the gunshot. The house was surrounded. Panic clawed at me, but I pushed it down. I had to think, had to find a way out. My eyes fell on the window, boarded up but not completely sealed. With trembling hands, I began to pry the wood loose, the splinters biting into my skin. The boards gave way with a groan, and I squeezed through the narrow gap, the glass shattering beneath me. Outside, the infected had gathered, a sea of twisted faces and gnashing teeth. The taste of freedom was sweet as I broke into a run, the wind cold on my face. The house was burning now, the fire I'd set in the kitchen a beacon in the night. The creatures were distracted, but they wouldn't be for long. I had to find a new place to hide, a new fortress against the horror that had claimed the world. The night was endless, the stars a mocking twinkle in the sky above. The road stretched out before me, a path of darkness that promised nothing but uncertainty. But I had 2 bullets, and I had hope, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to survive another day.